Sheep were good this weekend. I saw pictures. Very interesting. Are they being better sold? No, they're just sheep. They don't eat up. I want some lamb chops. So we gotta talk to them.
We got 30, that was 30. Some people weren't registered.
To what?
30 to 24. To 20
to 24.
24.
Okay. So, yep. So we validated the town meeting. The meeting stays, the votes stay the same as opposed to the closing of Great Brook Road. Anything else to come before this town meeting? I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you for everybody coming to the town meeting. Five, 406 of the Town Charter, the Milford Town Council hold a public hearing to consider the following: repeal Chapter 7, Article 6, Waste Management Royalty Fund from addition of proposed Article X, Municipal Roads Committee to Chapter 2. The Code of Ordinances is authorized by Chapter 98 of the Connecticut General Statutes at New Milford Town Hall, 10 Main Street, New Milford, Connecticut, on October 22nd, 2018 at 722 E. Paul Martin Road, dated New Milford, Connecticut, this 10th day of October. Mr. Grimes.
Yes, good evening, members of the council. This public hearing, so there's two ordinances before the public hearing tonight. One was a letter that the council had received in its packets, I believe, at the October 9th meeting. There's a letter from the Recycling Center Subcommittee Chairman supporting the repeal of the ordinance, as well as a letter from Attorney DeBella, co-town attorneys, basically indicating the process and that it's permissible to repeal this ordinance in total. The other proposal is for a municipal roads committee. This would create a permanent advisory committee similar to what the town has for the Northfield One-Room Schoolhouse Committee, for the Film Commission, for a lot of committees that are, I guess, unique to New Milford, you could say. And the purpose is to advise town government. As everybody knows, the Roads Committee has been working very hard for the better part of the last year, and I believe it's the intention of the mayor's office, which you could speak to directly, Mayor, that the town have a permanent municipal roads committee. That's what's before the public hearing tonight.
That's it.
Do we have anybody from the public that would like to address either number 1 or number 2 of the public hearing? Seeing if we don't have anyone.
I'll do it.
Mr. Whitman.
Sure. I'm the chairman of the Roads Committee, and I'd like to say that we most appreciate the ability to... I'm sorry, John Whitman, and the chair of the Milford Roads Committee. So we've been reinstated about every 6 months for the last, I think we're coming on 2.5 years. And we've done a lot of work. I mean, right now the Long Mountain Road is in full construction. Squire Hill is going to be coming up next. Stephanie is fully paved. Great Brook was paved. You might have heard some of that, a little bit about the good things on Great Brook Road. A lot of other roads are being happening. We're looking next year to do a good size appropriation bond and other forms of funding to get that done, to get more roads in town done. And we'll be putting that slate out publicly very soon. But we've partnered with the mayor's office, with the Department of Public Works, that created what we call a very cohesive team to get things done. And it's not unique, some of the things we're doing, but it certainly has ramped up in this current administration. We truly appreciate what's happening with the mayor giving us this endorsement. So with that, I would urge that this public hearing approve the permanency, regular status of our committee, and that we can just move forward and just continue to do the good work that we feel we're doing for the town of Milford.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just will point out for the record that with respect to the proposed ordinance, there is a Scribner's error in it. It was the intention to have a 7-member commission. Obviously, I'm sorry, Mr. Bear, I'm a student of social studies, not of math. Says 2 and 3. Obviously, that does not equal 7. It should say 3 and 4 further down. That's Scribner's error, so it's not substantive to the proposed ordinance itself.
And lastly, I'd like to comment, piggybacking on our chairman of the Roads Committee, Mr. Whitman, as we're going to multi-year bonding and doing our road work, it's much needed in our infrastructure. It's important that we get our road capital plan together in the winter so that in the fall we can break ground right away, and it's through their hard work that we can make that happen. Making them a permanent committee. We don't have to go through the rigmarole of every 6 months trying to come back to the council. It just expedites everything, gives a sense of purpose and permanency. So I highly recommend that we continue and move forward with this ordinance. Councilman Esposito.
Mayor, I am extremely pleased that this has come forward. From the day I decided to run for office, I thought this committee was necessary. And I've stated it for the last 5 elections on one of the things I wanted to accomplish and would hope to accomplish. And I am absolutely tickled pink right now that this is going forward. The assistance that I think this road committee has already given to the town and for future projects is going to be invaluable. This has been needed for a long time. I'm absolutely thrilled. I hope everybody supports this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing this forward.
Anything else? Like to make a motion to close.
So moved.
Any
Second.
other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We have 45 days to...
45 days for the close of the public hearing, which was tonight.
Yep. But we'll make sure this is on the next agenda.
Please.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to move on to our town council regular meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I want to know how pink Tom is.
It's pretty
Take
pink.
that for a drink, Walter, and I'll show you.
It's pretty pink. Matter of fact.
You're pink now.
If we could all stand for the pledge, and then a moment of silence. Ms. Francis, if you could lead us in the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We can have a moment of silence for our men and women in the armed forces. Thank you. Is Mr. McGuire here?
Joe. Oh, sure.
Mr. McGuire.
All right, sir. All right. Whoops. Oh,
And what we're doing is highlighting wonderful things that go on in our community. Our children, our volunteers, and what we do which makes our town so special. So one of the things I'd like to do tonight is honor someone that's very special to us in our community, Mr. McGuire. Whereas Patrick J. McGuire was born in the Bronx, New York, to Joanna and Patrick McGuire II. He attended schools in New York and New Jersey, including New York University, and whereas Patrick married Mary Jennings on May 15, 1965, and moved from New Jersey to New Milford in 1978. They have 4 children, Patrick, Brendan, Colleen, and Aaron. They're also proud grandparents of Ashley Marie, Patrick Hunter, and whereas Patrick worked for Union Carbide Corporation for 33 years, and he was also the administrative aide to Mayor Arthur Piper from 1995 to 2001. And whereas Patrick is a wonderful bagpipe player and has been playing since high school, he is a proud charter member of the Celtic Cross Pipes and Drums since 1990 in Danbury, where he plays for area organizations and events, including ours, New Milford. That's right. Including ceremonies for fire departments, police department, VFW, American Legion, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, Pearl Harbor Day, dedications, Village Fair Days, and Thanksgiving lunch at the Children's Center. And whereas Patrick dedicates a lot of his time to the community and is currently a member of the St. Francis Xavier Knights of Columbus, the 9/11 Memorial Maintenance Committee, an honorary member of Water Witch Hose Company No. 2, and the New Milford Police Honor Guard. He is an advocate for the Donate of Life campaign and was named the 2018 Irishman of the Year, and along with his wife Mary, was crowned King and Queen of the 2013 Village Fair Days. Now therefore I, Pete Bass, Mayor of the town of New Milford, to hereby express the gratitude of the citizens of the town of New Milford and thank Patrick J. McGuire for all that he does and continues to do for our wonderful town.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next public comment.
I only have one, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Todd Brookham. Thank you, Todd.
It's just me. Okay, I support the library vote coming up. It has nothing to do with the fact that my wife works there at all, really nothing at all, totally unrelated. She's not allowed to be here because she works for the library and I am, so I got basically kicked out of the house tonight and here I am. So basically, we thought it would be helpful to have a show of support for the library. We all think it's a great thing. I think everybody's been behind it. But I just thought it would be helpful if we got a show of support from everybody. So I invited everybody out to the, we're going to be on the Saturday, November 3rd from 9 to 11 on the green and right in front of the library. So if you want to bring a sign, BYOS, bring your own sign, or whatever you want to do, just to show a little bit of support for the library. I think it's a great thing. I honestly do. I could get into it, but you know, you guys have all heard that already. In terms of equal representation, if there's a rally against the library, I don't know where that is. And if there was one, I would not tell you where it is because I don't want anyone going to that rally. So 9 to 11, November 3rd, 9 to 11 on the green. Hope to see everyone there. Thank you. That's it.
The end of the list, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll keep the mayor's comments very brief. First of all, I'd like to thank or congratulate again our New Milford High School band for their they continue to win their competition. So we'd like to thank them again, placing first place. Outstanding job, way to represent our town. Thank you. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit quickly about the roads. So we continue to work on Long Mountain Road. We've completed phase 1, which is a reclamation of the southern portion of Long Mountain. Done the actual subbase and done the paving. We've now moved on to phase 2, where we're going to continue on with that endeavor. We're looking at a completion date of the end of November for Long Mountain Road. We talked to our contractor. He feels confident in being able to do that, weather permitting. So we're continuing to move on that. For those that were here at Great Brook Road, that was finished last on Friday. Milling and paving was done there. Great Brook was also done. Some of the continued work that will be done during this portion of the week is we're looking to finish up. Stephanie was done. We're looking to move to Sega, and we're looking to move to, I believe, I forget the other name of the other road that we're moving on. John, do you know the other road? Okay. There was another road that we were looking, Carmen Hill 1. We were looking to get done and completed. We're also looking to where Pickett District is, the railroad crossing. We're looking to have that done by the end of November. We partnered with Housatonic Valley Railroad, and we're looking to get that done and completed. We're also in the process of hiring a design engineer and a surveyor. Bringing them in-house, as I've talked about before, is going to save the town money, as well as they'll be working 5 days a week, 8 hours a day on New Milford roads. Currently, our consultants work on not only our roads, but other roads. So we're looking to implement that. When we do implement that, that should be a cost savings, as well as getting our design plans ready for when we're going to break ground, which is going to be in the spring. We're also looking to do, with our roads committee, our 5-year capital plan, breaking out the roads year by year, so that our engineers are going to know which roads need to get engineered first and how we're going to do it. We're going to properly plan and properly execute, which will bring more roads, more efficiency, and a greater transparency to our taxpayers. We're also looking at partnering with our roofs, which we've been doing with our Board of Education partners. The high school is already being worked on to repair the damage that was done during the storm, but we're also looking at the roofs of Hill and Plain, of Sarah Noble, and of Northville. Sarah Noble will be the one that we're going to be doing next. I'll be bringing back those information and numbers to the town council. Also, we're looking at different ways that we can save money. One of the ways that we're looking with our Board of Education partners is our health insurance, which continues, as everyone else, to rise at a rapid clip. So we're looking at opportunities to save in that respect. We'll be bringing those back to the council when we have some firmer numbers. But we're looking at all cost efficiencies. Another thing is we have decided to use Verizon in our fleet management. And what Verizon is going to do, we're going to be installing navigation and tracking on all of our town vehicles. They're going to be allow us to use at the most efficient way when we need to change the oil, where they go, what the mileage is going to be, and what the effectiveness is on the gas mileage. And also when they go, how they go. We're all going to track that, data mine that, and see if there's ways that we can create some efficiencies. And talking with Verizon, they're talking about a 20% efficiency lift. So that would be a nice savings for the town of New Milford. We're also looking at other efficiencies. We're also looking at, through all our departments, how we can create those efficiencies and those dynamics. So I'll be bringing those back to the council next week, our next meeting, and the meetings after. Also, I've talked to our Board of Education partners and our Board of Finance partners. November or December, we are going to do a joint meeting of all 3 bodies, where we're going to talk about the budget, and moving forward, we as a town are going to see how we're going to implement things. Planning is the key. Transparency to you, the taxpayer, is paramount, and we're going to be doing that. So I'll be following that up in the next couple of meetings to the town council to let you know how we're going with those. With that being said, I'd like to move on next to our next item on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. And for those in the public, this is the second time that we've done this. These are some regular business, and if it is not something that one of our council people feel needs to be pulled off the agenda, is something that we just approve and we move on. It's to expedite the agenda. Councilwoman Francis?
Move to council approve items 5A through D on the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Okay. Item 6, the Department of Emergency Service and Public Protection. We have a resolution. I move for the council to approve the following resolution. Be it resolved, the town of New Milford may enter into, with, and deliver to the State of Connecticut Department of Energy Services and Public Protection, Division of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, any and all documents which it deems to be necessary or appropriate, and it further resolved that Pete Bass, as mayor of the town of New Milford, is authorized and directed to execute and deliver any and all documents on behalf of the town of New Milford Town Council, and to do and perform all acts and things which he deems to be necessary or appropriate to carry out the terms of such documents.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Item 6B, move to create a nonprofit application subcommittee consisting of 5 members for a duration of 6 months beginning October 22nd, 2018, ending in April 22nd, 2019. The charge of this committee is to review funding applications from nonprofits and make recommendations to the town council and the Board of Finance.
And this was, as we,
So the second person?
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And this is to, as the nonprofit subcommittee had brought to the council and we approved, this is our new application procedure. So when nonprofits come in to apply for grant funding, if it is available, and that will be when we look at the budget, that they've actually gone through an application process now, where they fill out the application. Now this committee will review the applications and will make recommendations to the town, to the mayor, and then to the town council. It is in the town council's sole discretion, as it always is, to either look at those and approve those, deny those, whatever the wish of the council is. But this is to kind of expedite it, and because we never had a proper process, this kind of at least lets the council see the recommendations from this committee.
Question?
Yes, ma'am.
And so if I think about the budget cycle, right, so we really need their recommendations by February and March. I just want to be clear that although this term goes to April 22nd,
Correct.
I confirm they'll be coming sooner
Sooner.
with recommendations?
They'll
What's the-
actually have it January, because that's when I'm
January?
getting. Yes.
All right.
So why is it temporary as opposed to?
Because it's only needed, and then we'll reform another one next year, so it's
So you want different
timeline.
people doing it all the time?
Correct.
Any questions over there? Mr. Baer?
Mr. Bear.
It's like giving out scholarships. That's not going to be easy, Mr. Mayor.
Right.
But it's a great idea.
Process makes it better than no process.
Any other discussion on that? Okay, number 7.
You're gonna vote on it?
Oh, we gotta vote on it. Sorry. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you.
Item 7, move to approve the following appointments and reappointments to boards, commissions, and committees. Commission on the Arts, John C. Maxwell III, filling vacancy October 22nd, 2018, November 30, 2020. Local Emergency Planning, appointment of Larry Gunnerman, filling vacancy on CERT, October 22nd, 2018 through November 30, 2018. Nonprofit Application Subcommittee, the following, all with terms of October 22nd, 2018 through April 22nd, 2019. Catherine Francis, Walter E. O'Connor, Cameron Mercani, Sharon Ward, and an unaffiliated vacancy yet to be named.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just a quick question, Pete.
Yep.
On the local emergency planning, 10/22 to 11/30, I mean, it's 5 weeks.
It ends,
Am I reading that right?
correct, it ends, then we have to
Reappoint.
reappoint.
Okay,
'cause
He's
that's the
filling a
term that it ends.
vacancy.
okay.
And as far as the vacancy in the other one, you just haven't found someone yet, or someone?
Different term. On the
On
nonprofit.
the
Yep,
Nonprofit.
on the nonprofit.
So is
correct.
it-
We're waiting.
If someone's interested, or do you
There's-
have?
We
some-
have some people that are
There's a
just
couple
waiting
people,
to
they're just waiting to,
make a decision.
Gotcha.
It's not easy.
any other discussion? All
And
those
then
in
just,
favor?
yeah,
I'm
just
sorry,
real quick,
Doug?
so.
No, that's all right. I know the reason we're doing this is because we had a problem with, number one, somebody just asking for money and not showing up. So there are going to be some guidelines where they have to fill out an application.
So they fill out, yep, so we approved the actual nonprofit application.
Right.
We brought to council, so there's an application package that they fill out now.
Right.
And then that application package, including financials,
Sure.
reason, impact on the community, gets reviewed by this application subcommittee.
Right.
They'll then make that recommendation to the mayor's office and then to the council. And then it's the purview of the council to either take those recommendations, not take them,
Okay.
but it kind of expedites the process.
Excellent.
Because we found prior to, there really wasn't a process, so it's
Right.
kind of a mix mash kind of thing.
Right.
So this provides some consistency.
Will we know
Yep.
who, we'll know the ones that they recommend against also?
Sure.
And I noticed you have a council and a finance member. Is that
Yes.
is that on purpose?
Absolutely.
And that's part, is that part of the charter, or not charter, but that's part of our decision, is we want a
It's part of the
representative?
process, so you have a council person and a board of finance person
Close
that are on this committee to
Okay.
help
I'll
guide the
stop
committee.
Are they gonna make a questionnaire for them, or is there something
Sorry.
already?
Okay,
Sorry.
we approved already as a council the application and the other documents that go with it. And it's quite extensive, although simple enough to fill out. And the criteria for the decision is multifaceted, so
Good.
it'll,
And if someone's gonna ask money, they should be accountable to give us information.
Absolutely.
and
And
reporting.
financials.
Midterm and
And
final and everything.
I agree.
Right, yeah.
Councilman Bear.
All right, going back to the local emergency planning, are we concerned whether he's an X, Y, Z, R, U, D, I,
There's no designation of party.
I can,
5 by 5? Does it?
Larry Gunnerman?
I don't know the.
I have no
part of
problem
it,
with that.
You
I
need a
vote
minority
yes.
rule? I don't.
But I will find out for you.
Okay, I do. Just a point of information, sir.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Item 8, we have the Community Center Committee here to address the questions posed by council members back on September 10th meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Oakes.
Speaking on behalf of the Community Center Committee, I was deputized to come forward and make a pitch, so I will. But I need some help. I have this. You have copies. I'm just going to try to fiddle around here and see if I can make this work.
I just have a question.
Is that,
In keeping with the decision made by this council for our rules, that things that were not in place on Wednesday of the agenda needed to be in place by Wednesday. I understand now, just correct me if I'm not right, that the PowerPoint we have in front of us that was just submitted is a streamlined, condensed, clearer version of the multi-page that was first?
It is.
Okay, and you're not going to read this to us, right?
God forbid.
I mean, you'll walk us through it.
You'll notice.
Won't drag us
You have
through
it
it.
in front of you. It's an eye chart to begin with. so-
It is a little bit.
Yeah, so I wasn't going to do that, but I was
good.
going to try to put it up.
Who knows how to start the projector?
What's that?
Who knows
I don't know how to help you.
Greg Bolero.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Greg.
I don't know how you got deputized, Mr. Oakes, if you don't know how to start the machine. I don't know how you got deputized.
I got deputized because I have a weak mind.
Was right here?
Screen's gotta come down.
Yeah, we all should watch this.
This was the question and answer.
Plug it in, boys.
I feel like,
There we go. Yes.
don't walk towards the light, whatever you do.
We're gonna have to turn off like half the lights to be able to see.
Because, can you pull the screen down, or no?
Yeah, I
No.
think that- was this guy full screen?
Just leave it the way it is.
The screen is very
I guess we could see it with the lights out.
wrinkled, and it really doesn't give you
All right,
that
fair enough.
picture as the
Yeah.
wall does.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what my recommendation is.
You're right.
Press power, you wait. I can do that.
I'm a pusher, push me down.
You're killing me.
You got me
You're
doing
killing me.
These are sugar-free.
I do not.
Yes, they are. I hate it. It's got chemicals.
It's got to take time. Yeah, sure. You know somebody leave the lights on over here, talking over there.
Go to slideshow.
A little bit of practice.
There. Okay. The Community Center Committee presented to the Town Council on the 10th of September. And the result of that was that there were many, many questions asked. Most of which couldn't be discussed, or the committee really didn't have the answers to those questions down pat at that time for a variety of reasons. Subsequently, Councilman Szymanski and the mayor asked a total of 22 questions that were not covered in the presentation. There's going to be some, I'm going to go through that. I'm going to go through that by Mayor Bass's questions first and Councilman Szymanski's questions second. There will be some overlap because they ask questions that are somewhat similar. And I'll try to, there'll be some overlap in the answers, but I'll try to do that as expeditiously as possible. As I promised, I'm not going to read the slides. Okay, so the mayor asked how many emails did the survey go to? And the answer was that we sent 14,115 emails. So we got about a 10% response rate at 1442. The committee didn't have any access to the emails. They were supplied by the various groups in town, primarily the library and the BOE. And the 10% response rate is pretty good for email. Now, the second question, verification that people were not able to respond more than once. We can't verify that. We can't guarantee that. When the committee got started on this process, they used the Public Library's SurveyMonkey tool to do it. We were under the impression that that tool would, that people could not respond twice from the same IP address. We turned out that that wasn't correct. Some people managed to respond twice. And since the committee didn't have access to the email addresses, we couldn't validate who responded at all. We just know that there are 1,400 plus that did respond. We don't know who they were, and that's fine. We didn't necessarily need to know who they were. So one of the things we'll talk about later on is Great Blue. We did reach out to them. They have their own web-based tool for electronic surveys. As you know, the idea is that they'll do 400 telephone surveys. And Greg Mullen got them to agree to do another 1,500 web-based questions. And we are pretty sure that they'll be able to spot any differences in type of response between the 400, which are scientifically arrived at, and the 1,500, which will be arrived at by some combination of what the Great Blue does and what the town has in terms of emails. And I just want to sort of address a couple of things here. Why Great Blue? They were the cheapest, and they happen to have a model. They did work in Simsbury. The work in Simsbury is quite like what at least the committee thinks they ought to do for New Milford, which was they looked at town services that were not presently offered. Working with their committee, they came up with a rough cost of what those services would be, and were able in their questioning to say, would you take a pool if it added X dollars to your taxes every year? Yes or no? So we thought that that framing, that is, it's easy to say yes to a service. It's another thing to say, oh yeah, I want that service if it costs $400 on my taxes. So we thought that type of experience was unique, at least in the 4 companies we looked at, and so we would recommend. That's why we recommended using them. The final thing, and this is personal. Great Blue is going to do call center survey work. I happen to be somebody who ran a large call center operation for a public company. So I've got the experience. I had 4 centers, over 1,000 in staff. So when the time comes, if we go forward with that, if you guys approve it, and so Great Blue is the guys to do it, I can go and sit in their call center and monitor what they're doing. And I have a good enough BS detector about that we'd be fine, I think, with that, if that's the way we go. Next question, what should the composition of this community center be? Well, the composition, whatever it is probably not a one-time deal. The services in the town will change. Demographics in the town will change. Demand for services will change. So if we're talking about what the services should involve, when we did our own internal survey, people seemed to like the idea of having agencies who had a role in delivering person-to-person services and educational and recreational programs. But in my mind, the final answer on this should take place after a real survey, a professional survey. And one thing that we're finessing here is the legal structure. One of the questions the mayor asked the committee to look at was, what should the legal structure be? And from my perspective, that needs to be addressed later. We may get there. I hope we'll get there. I have some ideas about that. I know other members of the committee have ideas about that. But in my mind, that's something that should come later in the game, rather than decide that now and then try to fit something to it. What functions of the community center are still in place from '79? Most of them aren't. And they're not centralized. Basically, one of the things I think our committee has to look at is the question of centralized versus decentralized. That overhangs everything we're talking about. And we haven't really addressed that as a committee yet. And that's fine, because I don't think we're necessarily at the stage where we should have addressed it yet. But that's something that has to be looked at. Back in the day, most of it was centralized. Today, it's largely decentralized. So that's something I think we need to look at. And the final thing I'd say is that going forward, we've talked a lot about appointing committees tonight. And I was a beneficiary of one of those in the Roads Committee. But going forward, the town may want to consider a permanent committee that sort of oversees services. You know, you've got them across a whole bunch of different departments, and so that they could oversee the services offered and possibly make recommendations as to services later on down the road. It's because, as I say, this is constantly in flux. Onward to question 5 of Mayor Bass's questions. Why 400? Well, all 4 recommended 400, and the reason they recommended 400 is sort of wrapped up in what Great Blue said, which is that they have a 95% confidence level at 400 with a less than 5% margin of error. And that's fairly good. We did talk about going to them and saying, what would it take to get that margin of error down? And the answer is you don't want to pay the money. So this seems to be a sweet spot. You can satisfy what you want to do. You've got a decent margin of error, and you're coming in at a price that is reasonable for the purpose. Next, there are only 3 dedicated centers. So what's a dedicated center? And while there wasn't an agreed definition, the committee has talked a lot about a community center being a place where people from a particular community gather for social, educational, or recreational activities. That's fine. Dedicated to us meant the town called it a community center. And so we had 2 or 3 that called it a community center. 3 were town-owned. That was the question that the mayor asked. That's what we found. There are only 3 town-owned community centers. There are 2 privately owned community centers in towns, and we have that up there at the bottom. Sherman and Stonington both have privately owned community centers. Moving on, question 6. I'm not going to spend any time on this. The question was, what else is out there? And this is it. There are sports facilities in a variety of places. And then there are other towns that sort of fluctuate between something that involves senior citizens. Some share the municipal buildings with the community center. It's all over the map, and mostly it seems to be driven by money. Number 7, how many community centers had not-for-profits in them, had rented to them? 1, Milford. And if you look at that, the Boys and Girls Club was asked by the town to do something. The deal was you pay $1 a year in rent and you pay for everything. It's possible we might be able to come up with something like that, but we haven't found any yet. Yeah.
For the audience, we look at about 40 or 50 of them, so they know that.
Yeah, Greg is making a good point. We looked at about 50 unique centers along the way, and we found this one. Not-for-profits. A few have approached us. I think we've talked about them at great lengths. I'll mention rip off the 4. The Culinary Center, Robotics and Beyond, the Amateur Radio Association, and Literacy Volunteers all contacted the Community Center Committee about being part of a future community center. We have not been approached by any for-profits. On the other hand, I think that's something the town has to think through. If it was a service-oriented for-profit company, it might fit, and it might help defray costs. But nobody's raised their hands and say they want to be part of the New Milford Community Center. No for-profit has said that to us. Is that mine or somebody else's? Sounds like mine. Mayor Bass's ninth question. How were costs determined? And how did they compare to other towns? Or did we find costs for other towns and their community centers? And the answer is yeah. We pulled together some preliminary figures. In town here, we only really looked at Pettibone and East Street because those are the current spaces that have a community center involvement that was within our purview. These numbers need to be validated. That's, we think, in the next stage of work by the committee, by the Community Center Committee. One of the things you'll see on our conclusion slide, I'll break the news now, is that we're going to try to do a detailed cost analysis as part of our ongoing operation of the committee from here. We did briefly look at a cost of new building, but really that was beyond our scope. We have some ideas about that because and I'll show you in a couple of slides, I think on one of Szymanski's slides, some costs we did uncover. And any new building cost, though, really depends on what the included services are and where you put it. So it's kind of hard for us, before any decision is taken to march forward, to say, oh yeah, it's going to be $622 a foot. That's kind of difficult and it's got to be 35,000 square feet. So that concludes Mayor Bass's questions. He probably has more, but that concludes his questions for the moment. So I want to move on to Councilman Szymanski's questions. His first question is, we said we'd look at costs of various sizes of buildings. And we did do some of that. We looked at Newtown, which cost about 400 square foot. It's a big, big operation. We looked at the renovation in Wilton. That cost in the twos, $257. And we looked at the renovation in Newington, which was $411. Now, you renovate something in Wilton and you renovate something in Newington, and you spend about 50% more. So you actually have to drill down and look at what's really going on there. So the numbers themselves, while they are a benchmark, they really get us nothing. We have to decide what we want and then go out to price it. This is again sort of a repeat of what we said on an earlier slide. We did look at East Street and JPCC. The key here is that they scale beautifully. I mean, if you look at the numbers of one at 24,000 square feet and the other at 75,000 square feet, the numbers kind of scale so that the numbers are proportional from one size to the next. So we think it's completely possible to scale a New Milford building from 10 to 70,000 square feet. But that would not work if we're talking about something that would be a new build, of course. Moving on. The second question, composition and operational structure. This is similar to another question that Pete asked. We did look at that. One of the things we didn't do was review the library. And we didn't do that because the Building Utilization Committee was told not to do it, and we followed their lead. We have learned that the library expansion will add 4 meeting rooms and a total of 2,400 square feet of additional meeting space. Only which 600 or so is additional meeting space, but there'll be 6 different meeting rooms. We did not review maintenance costs. We did not review grounds costs, mowing and planting and things like that. And we have, our work is at this point still an interim and working document. There's more to come on all of those in the next phase of what the Community Center Committee is doing. What services and programs do we provide? Well, I think you all have, you know that Councilman Szymanski provided us with a comprehensive list of services that we have actually already given to you guys. You already have it. We were pleased to see it. It shortened our workload, and it's nice to have it all in one place. Comparison to other towns as regards services. Basically, our view is that other than aquatic programs, the work that was done by our precedent committee and our utilization subcommittee, both key subcommittees, Other than aquatic, we think we meet or exceed what other towns are doing. So we don't have to take a backseat to anybody on that. The question is, do we want to do more than that? Do we want to do it differently? But we're in good shape that way. Question 5. What additional services do we think townspeople would like? Well, we did a survey, right? And it tracked on what the 2010 POCD survey said, which was essentially that aquatic-related activities topped the list, with the swimming pool being most frequently mentioned. That has to be validated because the fact that people mentioned it, great, but not that many people mentioned it out of the 1,400 that responded. So, what's the number? I think you said 27.
27 plus 18 splash pad.
Okay. So about 45 mentioned pool or splash pad. One thing we found by meeting in Pettibone is that there's a real need for improved HVAC. We didn't have to survey for that. We just know that. We know that at a profound level. So just put that in there. Paul asked about what's the potential revenue stream. We've had documented this before. It's about $48,000 a year from the not-for-profits who have expressed an interest. You know that that's Culinary, who is willing to pay $1,500 a month, Robotics and Beyond at $1,000 a month, and Thrift Mart at $1,500 a month. All of that's $4,000 a month, $48K a year. We talked briefly about educational components, and there seemed to be interest. But we didn't get into that deeply enough, and it was not a feature of great note in our survey. It might be something we want to look at more carefully, but there's a lot of offerings of educational things around town already. And Paul's work shows that. So it's unclear to me that we really need to do it, and we felt the way to do that was a bit beyond, how we would go about doing that was a bit beyond our mandate. Okay, did we coordinate with, he calls it the Space Utilization Committee, we think he means Facility Utilization Committee. And the answer is no, we didn't. Greg Mullen attended most of their meetings as our spy in the sky. But one thing we can draw from what we know is that the town is not short of more meeting space. It's got plenty of meeting space. Moreover, this again gets to that question of distributed versus centralized. And the answer isn't simple, but since we don't need anything more, then the question is, how do we know what we're utilizing today? And one of the things that we've uncovered is that the town has a software program, MyRec, which it doesn't seem to us that we can't access it and find out what's going on. Maybe you guys can, but if it were available and transparent, we'd know that, gosh, that particular room is used too often. This room is not used at all. And we get, to your point, we get more efficiency across the resources we currently have, which is a long step towards deciding what we should be doing. And Paul asked us about, had we thought about filling the existing space? And the answer is no, we haven't. We're busy trying to find out what the space was and who would want more of it. I will point out before I leave this slide that this question of centralized and decentralized has been on my mind a lot, and the answer isn't simple. We've got issues of convenience, we've got issues of parking, we've got issues of suitability for purpose, and all of that has to be wrapped up in whatever decision we make. Onward, question 8. He asked, of the 30 towns or so, how many had a dedicated center? And as we say, dedicated in our minds versus shared, dedicated was a way for our committee to say the town had named something a community center. We didn't go beyond that. We didn't go in too deeply about that. 20 towns, about 66% of what we surveyed, do not have a dedicated center. 6 towns appear to focus primarily on outdoor athletics. 4 towns, the community center is really the senior center. And in 3 towns, they're sort of co-located with another municipal building like the library or the town hall. And I put a link in here to Newington's center, which is exactly that. There's... What's that?
No, I'm just being sarcastic. I can't click on the link.
Oh, let me help you. The Mortensen Center is actually a new town hall and a new community center in the same facility. So that may be an interesting model going forward. His 20-item questionnaire we had already supplied. We did that last week. And under question 10, under multiple definitions, we're back to the multiple definitions. No single definition. Most companies that we looked at have something that you could loosely call a community center, even if they don't call it a community center. One of the things I would mention, and this is about us, not about the market study, is we didn't look at services provided by church groups in town, although we know they have community space, and we know they have services that they offer to the community. That may be something we want to look at as well, whether they want to do more, they want to do less, how that plays in to whatever we do going forward. Trying to keep you from falling asleep with all the questions. Pools. Yeah, pools are a big deal. Paul asked about what do they cost to construct, what do they cost to maintain. The first question you got to answer there is indoor or outdoor. And then you've got issues of time and whether there was something there already. We've looked at, Greg, 20 towns. So you see the ones here, you see Cheshire, overhead $1 million, the cost recovery is 65% of that. Wallingford is renovating now with $4.5 to $6 million with a pool and splash pad. Some of you remember the aquatic study of 2002, $5.7 million that was turned down in a referendum. Some others that are not on the slide that I'll just briefly mention. Raleigh, North Carolina, enclosed pool, 2007, $24.5 million. Elk Grove, California, enclosed pool, 2015, $20.3 million. Wayne, Nebraska, enclosed pool, between 6.6 and 7.5 million, all over the map. All over the map. So we have to, before we think about that, we have to actually decide, what do we want? Is it going to be an enclosed pool? Is it going to be a 50-meter pool, 8 lanes wide, splash pad, locker room, all the bells and whistles or not? Moving on, question 12. He asked, he said, we had said on September 10th, the current agencies, based upon our interviewing of them, said that they're satisfied. And the real question he asked was, what do you think as a committee? And so we think that social services utilizes their space efficiently. We are not sure about that for the youth agency. And we recommend further study on their space. Moving on, Parks and Rec, again, they appear to do a good job with their office space, the public space. It doesn't look efficient to us. We try to use a standard for offices of 200 square feet. If those of you who have been to Pettibone in its new configuration know that some of those spaces are heroic. I worked for a Fortune 500 company. I never had an office as big as some of those. So moving on. We are moving to Councilman Szymanski's penultimate question. Under 8 below, he thought Diane meant communities on committee. What rent do they charge? So we looked at 10 towns and none rented space to nonprofits. That's the space utilization. The precedent committee found Milford, which we had talked about. The Milford charter says they got to provide it, so they didn't want to pay for it, so they brought in somebody to do it, and that's what led to the $1 a year lease. Space is provided for free. Okay. Now, my swan song. We think that what New Milford currently provides meet or exceed what other towns provide, except for aquatics. We think that some of the facilities are underutilized and some are clearly inefficient in the way they operate. In our survey, most people were pretty satisfied with what we offer, but 47% by saying, writing in something, 40% of those surveys, a little over 700, we're not 700, were interested in the things that are listed up there: pool, splash pad, exercise, more town fields. We reiterate our plea for better HVAC. So the next steps for the Community Center Committee are two things, really. One is we're dividing the committee into two functions. We had 4 before, now 2. One is cost subcommittee that's going to look closer at determining costs of future and any current and any future community center services. The second is better opinion research. So there'll be, our outreach group will continue and will be augmented by a few more people. And assuming you approve it, that their view will be to determine what services citizens want and what they're willing to pay for it. Because that, to me, if we don't do that, we haven't done our job. And so my last point on that is we think that the town council should help design the objectives of the survey. I've just been spouting off here, and you guys may or may not agree with what I just said. You should be the guys who say, these are what we want the objectives of the survey to be. I think at that point we can leave the design, the question design, the survey design to the professionals, the pros. In our case, we're suggesting Great Blue, and they can come up with the questions. We also think, though, that we ought to expand that stakeholder idea to include people in the town as well as people from the agencies so that we get proper representation in any questions that get asked going forward. So our last step, we hope you approve the Great Blue proposal and we can get on with the rest of our work. And I do have a snarky, do you have any questions about our answers?
Any questions for Mr. Oakes?
I do.
Lisa?
You mentioned that the MyRep program needs to be used in the next, first of all, thank you so much. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Really appreciate the flow, the thought process, and I like how you didn't read the slides. MyRec needs to be utilized more. This is not a new subject or the first time I've heard this. Are there any barriers that you saw from your conversations about them actually utilizing that? Because
I think it's will to use it.
Okay.
I
All
would
right.
thought you meant will a person. Who's
No.
a will person?
Will, he'll be here later.
You mentioned a couple of times in some of the other towns when there are shared services between a municipal center and a community center, it was a matter of money and economies of scale.
Yeah.
Is there a dollar amount in particular across those entities that said, yep, when you get to this dollar amount, you have to share services?
Well, it is a step function. There's no question about that.
Okay. Any idea kind of the range of the step function? Or I can just leave you with a question.
Yeah,
that
leave
would
me
be
with
a
the question. We'll come back to you with a better answer than
Yep.
it's a step function, which it is. That's true as far as we go.
Yep. Again, I'd just like to thank the committee, and I don't mean to preempt anybody else's questions, but one of the reasons we adopted a new process to have the information so much earlier for us before the meeting was so that we didn't end up staying till 11 o'clock every night and peppering everybody with questions that might be in the information. So I, for one,
I appreciate that.
would like to take some time and not rush to anything, and I want to digest what they've shared because some of this is new information for me, and not make a decision tonight as a result, but maybe come back at our next town council as we've done with some other topics. But that's just where I'm at because I don't want to shortchange the good work that was done tonight.
Katie?
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Good spokesperson for this whole thing. The MyRec program, you said you haven't looked at it yourself. Greg, have you?
Yeah.
And the way that it could work potentially for all spaces is if someone actually inputs all that other space.
Correct.
So that's where Will comes in.
Exactly.
And I don't believe anyone's ever asked anyone to sit down and do that. I don't know if it's a gargantuan or could be done in an afternoon, I don't know. I don't know the program that well. Okay, so it's not a question for you, it's a question for us to take up, as we've been spending all this time and good volunteers' time and efforts. Why haven't we done that? Mayor, council, agency, department heads. Why haven't we done that? We've got committee upon committee looking at facilities, looking at grounds, looking at everything we've got, and nobody bothers to use a piece of software that we have. So that's kind of frustrating to me. I agree with Lisa. I think you've given us, thank you for making it more concise and paring it down. And I just have one question, because you guys are familiar with the data. The centralized versus non-centralized, and to me, the fact that, because we are a rather spread out town, as you know, that and the fact that the majority of people polled were happy with the services that we had. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. And so the way that they're happy with it is in its current, which is not centralized, right? Okay, just so that definition follows. Okay.
Let me, if I could, that's really important what she just said. Are you sure that answers yes? Because I think the question, I think the way I understood the survey was you asked if they were satisfied with the current program offerings, not the location of those offerings.
They're satisfied with their way to obtain and utilize those services. I'm sure you
was
didn't
that the
get into
question?
too much
No.
weeds
I don't think
with
that
it.
was the question.
The actual, a lot of comments were directed at having to, first of all, there was I think a fundamental question in the way the survey was designed, in that people didn't know if we were talking about Pettibone and what happens after Pettibone, or were we talking about something that had nothing to do with Pettibone? So there was some glare around the answer to whether they were satisfied. And a lot of people commented about locations. And you want to talk about that? No, I don't.
So, okay, so what would be helpful then would be some type of stratification of the answers about location.
Okay.
Some kind of summary, like a bar chart.
I think, Mr. Oakes, that the thing that's kind of been a bugaboo for me is that it is, and it's no one's fault, it's almost impossible to discuss what the town wants when we have a quasi, what's been called a community center, not just quasi, that's what it's got a title and it's got a sign.
Exactly.
So I think it is impossible for people to not relate to that when they say, yes, I like it, and that could be based upon where they live.
And it could be either way. I mean, they could say they like it because they think you're talking about Pettibone, or they could say they like it because they think you're not talking about Pettibone.
So there's one of the
we
things
just work
about a
with this
survey and whatever that points out to me, but I think you did a wonderful job, and I would like some time to review it and maybe communicate with you regarding other questions that come from that.
Walter? I don't envy your position on this committee at all. And
we don't either.
Well, part of the presentation is pie in the sky.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're talking about aquatics, you're talking about a swimming pool. There was no way would I vote for a $25 million swimming pool.
I'd be there with you.
Pardon?
I'd be there with you.
Okay. And here, for 20 years, we've been arguing about modernization of the library.
Yeah.
And finally, something is going to happen. I just, you know, and then you talk about people that are already in John Pettibone. It's a work in progress right now. You gotta give it time to see what happens. Too soon to simply say it's not working, shut it down. You got to be patient. You got to be patient with it. Yeah, there are areas out there, but you got to be patient about that. And you want other services. What kind of other services do you want, and who's going to pay for it?
Bingo.
Okay, I'm done.
Mike?
Yeah, I just want to get back to what the survey and being very careful. I read through the survey, and it says, you know, based on the survey, what do they support of a community center? And it's like town agencies whose role is providing in-person services. Well, that's what that Pettibone is. Town agencies that provide a service.
Yep.
Educational, recreational programs, people, well, you know, that type of thing. And then it's got many residents feel local nonprofits and possibly for-profits should be in there. Well, that's because we've been talking about that for a year now, that they should be in there. So I mean, I just feel that we got to be very careful in the wording, and I'm glad that's why we're talking about a professional company, because the wording is just so important. Because as I said, I'm reading this, I'm going, a lot of these answers to these questions are just based on what's already there and what we want there. Did you want to interrupt me? You can go and then I'll say.
Yeah, but when you're done, I'd like to go.
No, you
No,
want
go
to,
ahead.
because I'm going to do a different change topic.
Okay, yeah, so on that particular topic, I liked what you said, which are different than the slide words about the town council should be among the town stakeholders to weigh in on survey design. Absolutely not. You hire a professional. Wait, you actually said objective.
I said objective.
But the slide says survey design, so I just want to make sure everybody heard that, and here's why it's important. Because if you start meddling with the professional you've hired for good money in the survey
Right.
design,
Yeah,
you're
right.
going to introduce confirmation bias.
That's why I
And we already
changed, I
have-
parsed that in my pitch.
I wanted to make sure everybody heard that, because I liked it a lot.
All right. Back to, I kind of agree with what Walter says is, you know, we have Pettibone, we're using it. Let's kind of write it out until this $5 million for Pettibone and $5 million for East Street comes into play. And that's, I think, when we have to make decisions. We already have, you know, three town services in there. And if some of the projects we're talking about with East Street happens, we might get a fourth with Board of Ed. I'm not against putting services in there, but I do think that and there is no business talking to us now, but if someone comes in and says, this would be the perfect spot for our business to come to town for manufacturing because it is in the manufacturing part of town, that should go away and we should find other homes for that. So I mean, I think whatever we do, because I know Pettibone's always the elephant in the room, anyone that goes into Pettibone, anyone that uses it has to know that it could be temporary because it is a building that's going to need a lot of work and it might not be worth it. $10 million that we could build a brand new building, we could probably get a nice start on something that might be a much better fit for that than we have. And you know, that's why I just think this whole community center and Pettibone are just two completely separate issues and we've kind of morphed them into one and I think that's been the dangerous part.
Okay.
The dollars are something that, you know, your committee couldn't, there's too many things before you can actually start putting prices on. But one thing that you did equivocate to the best of your ability is in a building that's being, I don't know, half used, there's one of the three agencies that is using that space efficiently. And efficiency equates to economy. And I think they do a fantastic job of it. I couldn't say more about that. If we could take that little segment away, that would be the best thing to do. But if we even, as someone says, we have to be patient, patience is good. In the meantime, we're opening windows and letting heat out and turning the heat on and turning the heat off, and we have people with rooms, as you said, heroic was a really good word for that. Napoleon might have liked one of those rooms just fine. And I think that while we're being patient, we shouldn't be sitting on our hands. I think there are some things that could be done by our agencies, by us. I'm not passing any work off here, but every day that this goes on is a day that windows are open and heat goes out. It's a day that a room has 2 people that used to hold 25. And I think it's something that we don't put our mind on because there is this mindset that we can't get rid of. But maybe if someone started working on that, we would have a better grasp of what is involved. Because now we have a number that is it's a good guesstimate maybe of what it costs to operate that building. But what if we were to try to make it, just starting with one part of one agency, to make it more efficient, we'd have a better idea of what it really would mean to fix the HVAC, the roof, all the things we've heard about. And then there's that other half of the building that's not being used. So, I mean, in the middle of all this, I know your committee's been tasked with a lot, and we've got committees upon committees on committees, but it's just, I think sometimes we've, along this way, we've lost sight of, because it's being used, nobody thinks about the fact that it's very inefficient except for that one area.
No, I agree with that.
So, well, for everybody, I meant that, not you.
Yes.
Mind if I add something? All right, so in my opinion, that the most important part about our committee is public outreach. We need to find out what the public wants before any decisions can be made, so that we can provide that information to you, so you can help make a decision. You know, we're not in the design, the use space business, we're in the public outreach business.
Absolutely.
And just while you're deliberating about this, I think it's important to remember that we're doing this so that you guys, the legislators, can make the best educated decisions possible. And that's only possible by knowing what the people want.
Right, and the only way we can make that decision, Greg, it's for the people, it's not us. And the only way we can put out that decision, as we do with anything, is we have to have the cost of it. What is everything determined that we do? The library, 20-some years, it all boils down to, everybody loves that library. Well, it's gonna cost me in my taxes. Everybody loves whatever it is. Everybody loves a pool. What's it going to cost me? So that's what I'm saying, is that sometimes we have to put the cart before the horse, but I think with all the time and effort that's spent on this, that's why I'd like to see somebody put some thought process into what is it really costing us to be so inefficient, and maybe what would it cost us to be more efficient?
Mr. Skelly.
No, I agree with Katie. You know, I don't know if we should really be in the business of being landlords. When you open up, you know, letting other businesses in there, whether they're nonprofit or not, anyone that's been in the building knows that it's going to have to be maintained and stuff, even off hours of what the town, are there till what, 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. So if you have other organizations in there on the weekends, maintenance, it's probably, you know, one of the largest one-level buildings in town. And anybody who's been in the building knows that the windows, knows that the roof and stuff like that. And you know, as Walter would said, we need more time. This is a big project. It could be even bigger. Not with the high school, but up to the level of more than you know, the library itself, and that took years to do. So we're getting throwing all this information at once, and it's something that we got to digest and go through. And there's going to be more questions than answers, I'm sure, ahead.
I agree with you about taking time. I personally agree with that.
But that's my biggest worry is that when you say $48,000, well then you know, how are you going to do the electric? You can break that up. Is it going to be under the guidelines? Triple net, who's taking care of the outside, who's taking care of who's locking the door, whose facilities is now going to be part of that building.
There's sort of two ways to look at that. One way is, you know, you've got high operating costs and you've got no cost recovery now. You know, how much are you willing to separately meter places to get 48 grand? Probably not. So to your point, you could land on either side of that one.
My feeling is that it would be more of a stress and financial burden if you weren't making enough money on the square footage to recoup the costs of the maintenance and taking care of it.
The issue there, in my mind, we're in that building every couple of weeks. The issue in my mind is if you price the common area maintenance into what a not-for-profit should be paying for the space, no one's coming anyway.
Right.
So that's just another way of saying let's not have any. So I think Katie's point about let's do what we can to make it efficient, and then we can make that decision later about whether we're going to pass the cost through or pass some of the cost through or not. But the 48 grand, assuming they did it, assuming you guys wanted it, at least it's 48 grand we didn't have the day before.
Mr. Esposito.
Just quick back to question 9. 5 million for Pettibone, 5 million for East Street. Where did both those numbers come from?
Let me answer that. The Board of Ed did a relatively recent engineering study. I think it was K, D, and G that went from top to bottom of East Street. And while they prefaced with most of that doesn't need to be done now, it's worth looking at from a 5-year capital plan point of view. And also with the Board of Ed, they've done their own 5-year capital plan, which is in excess of that. So, you know, without exaggerating numbers, we want to be sure that, you know, when you look at the building, they have an understanding that there is a capital cost to them. And then compare that to what costs they new, because the truth of the matter is, a lot of communities are building new because they're much more efficient.
I hope I'm not struck by lightning, but I must admit, for the first time in a long time, well, probably for the first time, I gotta agree with Greg.
Can we get that on film? Can we get that on film?
Turn the camera this way.
Time to quit, Walter, time to quit. Okay, Greg, you can retire, happy man now.
So, just, I don't know what I can say after that, but to follow on to Tom's point, I thought the more interesting number for me, and I'm not an expert, so you can poke holes in this, was the $200 to $400 per square foot renovation cost that other communities have come up against. Those are big numbers if you multiply them out times the square footage. I mean, anywhere from 5 million to 25 million.
Sure.
Well, one of the reasons I say this, because I know the roof at least at Pettibone is $3 million. That was the number that was thrown around for many years. I mean, these numbers, Walter and I toured it a couple of times when after a couple of elections. I mean, it's a big number over there. Both buildings have their challenges.
And if just follow on your point for a second, when we did our survey, we could account for about 40,000 square feet of community center-like activity. So if that's too big for East Street and too small for Pettibone. So I think that you got to roll that around in your squash too.
Right.
Mike?
My bigger problem with a lot of this is there's no need for community center until we had an empty building and said, what do we do with it? And we put some municipal buildings in there, and we're talking about with the nonprofits. Is that might need to be answered? Do we need a community center in this town? I mean, I am biased because I am the president of the culinary school, so it would be a great location for us. But I also look at the private sector. I mean, we keep talking about things that we want a community center to do, but there are private companies in this town that try to offer those services, and I don't want to undermine them and that type of thing. It's just, do we need this community center if most of these services have already been being done, just spread out through town? We got to watch our communities. We're doing this huge renovation to a library, and in a couple places, a couple towns, the library was their pseudo community center, and that's going to have meeting spaces. And it's just my fear of anything that moves out of downtown hurts New Milford, because what makes New Milford special is our downtown and having people in downtown. And when I drive through town and I see that the parking lots are packed and there's stuff going on, I'm excited, because it means that the businesses that are there are getting people shopping and going to the restaurants. And that's one thing that I just want that to be, it just makes me nervous in moving anything away from the town.
So that point, Mike, is exactly what I think we all agree on, is that when you mention pool, skating rink, sports facility, everybody's, yeah. You mention $100 tax, $200, $1,000, this is going to cost a gazillion. I mean, that's really why I think when you say no one mentioned community center, we used to have one across the street when I was a kid, so there's a lot more people now. But I mean, isn't there a premise? No, I can't think of who it is now, but you fill up what you have. When you empty it, it'll get filled up again. So we had an empty space and it got filled. If the Board of Ed had gone ahead to move over there, we might be having a completely different conversation, but they didn't. So we have to deal with what we have, and I think you said it correctly, is that you don't know, a new building might cost 10 million or whatever, but we don't even know what it costs to keep the one that we've got going. Those are things that we really, to have a complete conversation, you need all that info, and you guys have done a great job with what you've gotten, but you're right, some of it isn't under your mantle.
And we have more to do.
Yeah, so.
And so for that reason, for the first time I have hope, actually, because the presentation, I think, demonstrated that we can get there. The committee has kind of gone through their storming, norming, and it's got some traction. That always takes time. And again, because we're having such a robust discussion now, I think we need to table this and really make sure we're clear about what we want the committee to do as next steps. I think to do anything else tonight is going to be premature and not fair to them.
Right. Oh, I agree. Your survey that is given us
There's a lot of information here.
some information to see I think there's some degree of validity in what's there about who wants what or what they like better than others. We also see what it costs to do certain things. So that's enough for us to ruminate on, I think, for the next couple of weeks.
Walter?
Is that a motion to table that then?
It is a motion to table the discussion.
Second.
Did everybody get their opportunity to finish
Yeah, I
their
just-
questions?
One thing I just want to comment, because you made the comment about the nonprofits. And nonprofits, these nonprofits do services for the town, and two of them are job training in robotics beyond and the culinary school. So it's not a black and white thing with some of these nonprofits. It's also in literacy, I'm not sure what the radio operators they help, but they do help citizens of this town, and we're talking about getting other educational services in that school. So it's not as cut and dry as you make it seem as far as getting
And your
nonprofits in
point
there.
is good, but my point is that what kind of financial burden will it add to the school? And he had mentioned it'd be 40,000 square feet of community service, correct? Is that
That's
what
the
you said?
entire town right now.
But there's fixed costs that we're already paying for the heat.
But there's wants and there's needs.
Yeah.
Like, exactly.
No, I know, but if we're there and we're using it, I'm just making the
But
comment.
we're not gonna just be fixing that area. As we have to, if it's the landlords, we gotta fix the whole building. So we can't just say, okay, we're gonna fix this room and fix that room. We have to fix the whole roof. We have to heat the whole building. So we have to not just look at just the three organizations that are coming in.
But that's why I said it's anyone that does go in there might be
Mr. Mayor.
temporary.
Mr. Mooney? Hi.
Did you have
Mr.
something
Mayor.
to say, Jeff?
A question to the
no, I thought you were doing
attorney.
it.
There's a motion
Oh.
on the floor to table and a second. Does that kill discussion, sir?
The motion to table is actually out of order. It's not an appropriate motion.
Okay.
You need a motion to postpone to a date and time. Attending a CCM workshop 2 weeks ago, the facilitator explained the motion to table.
Lisa?
Okay, I retract my motion to table.
Postpone to the November 13th regular council meeting.
I would like to make a motion to postpone this discussion until the November 13th town council? Or do we?
Yes,
Second.
It's not a debatable motion.
that's the right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Walter.
Okay.
We gotta vote on it.
All those in favor?
It's not-
Aye.
Opposed?
He didn't ask us on no discussion.
Good. And thank you again.
My friend,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much.
Thanks, have a good job.
For
Great
your,
presentation.
for your patience and
Great job.
perseverance.
Okay.
The whole committee, thank you.
And I'm not,
Thank you.
Anyway, okay.
Do the public hearing.
Item 9, motion to repeal ordinance as presented. Quote, motion to approve the repeal of ordinance Chapter 7, Article 6, Division 3, Waste Management Royalty Fund from the Code of Ordinances.
second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Move to enter executive session.
So for the first one, I'd just like to call in Mr. Bolero for the first part of the executive session.
Someone has to second.
Second.
Thank you,
Any
Walter.
discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Okay, let the record show that during executive session, there were no motions made, no votes were taken. Move we enter into regular session?
Second.
Any
And
discussion,
Walter?
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any other business to come before the town council?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Any discussion?
Thank
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everybody.
Ciao, everybody.
Have a good night.
Great night.